Hi, I'm John Kursky. This is Atlas, and in today's video, I'm going to show you how to use the Power BI modeling MCP server in a GitHub Cloud Agent. All right, so before we get started, don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel so you can stay up to date on all the new content and features we'll be rolling out in the coming weeks. And with that, in a prior video, I showed you how to set up a cloud agent and the GitHub app so that you could have it review your PBIP files in your repo. Now, in today's video, I want to show you a really cool feature with the Power BI modeling MCP server so that you can actually use the cloud agent to interact or query the Power BI report or semantic model, more appropriately, the semantic model, query it in the service. Now, there's a little bit of setup, so I want to walk you through that. But what's really nice about this is that if you have like the GitHub app on your phone and you're not necessarily in front of your computer, you could ask questions of the cloud agent to maybe check the status or run some test queries. If you've watched any of my videos about the AI-enabled tester, you know that Power Query Lint has a UDF library that you can use to create tests that can evaluate the health of your model. So I want to show you kind of that scenario. So let's take a step back a little bit. Let's say I get a phone call or I get a text saying, you know, I think there's something wrong with the semantic model. Could you check it out? And maybe I'm in a meeting and I'd like to just have it run some of the test queries from the UDF for PQL assert and tell me if anything's wrong. And maybe I could also later on ask it to build new tests, but I just want to see what is the status of the semantic model based on the testing that I have available. So up on my screen here, where do we start this? Well, it all starts with a service principal. We need a service principal. So if you don't have access to your portal.azure.com or your Azure tenant, this is where you would ask for help or bring donuts to the office to the tenant administrator and ask them to create a app registration. Now, in this case, I've created one called SP PQL assert. And when you do create it, I'm not going to expand it, but in the window here, let me just zoom in. Under Essentials, there's some information that's going to be in there, the client ID and the tenant ID. And you're going to want to copy that for use later. The client ID is the unique GUID that identifies the service principal. The tenant ID is what tenant that's associated with. And then you'll also want to create a client secret. Now, my best practices, depending on your company's policy, is it could be less than a year. Just make sure that if you're using this in production environments, you set some sort of reminder that the token is going to expire and you can reset that later on. Now, once you create that, you're going to get the value will appear and you can only copy it while you're on this screen. So make sure you also save that off temporarily to maybe Notepad. Now, once you have that, you need the tenant ID, the client ID, and the client secret. The next thing that you will do is head on over to your GitHub repo. Now, the assumption that we have about the GitHub repo is you have Copilot, and with this channel, the AI-enabled Power BI developer, we have that assumption in pretty much every one of our videos. Now, if I go here, this is a sample kind of repo that I have that I've used. Notice it's internal to my company. I'm not storing my PBIP files open to the rest of the community, nor am I necessarily using this cloud agent in the public eye. One of the things that you'll have to make sure you have is under settings. So if I click on settings, you'll have to have your environment set up. Now, if you click on environments, often if you've been using Copilot for other purposes, this environment will be created already. If not, you will need to create it, and you need to make sure it's spelled exactly that way. Now, if I click in this environment, what you'll need to do then is, if I scroll down, is you're going to add the 3 environmental secrets. And be very, very careful about the spelling here. You want to make sure that it starts with Copilot MCP and has this exact spelling for the client ID, the client secret, and the tenant ID. This becomes really important when we get to the configuration. Also, Copilot is looking for this prefix. Now, thanks to Rui Romano for giving me this tip a couple weeks back. Saved me some time and some heartache trying to set this up myself. Now, if I zoom out, the way that works is, if I was to edit this, I can paste the secret value in here, update the secret. I've already created it, I've updated it, so I'm not going to do that again. So now that we have the environment set up, we've identified the client ID, client secret, and the tenant ID. We do need to make sure that this service principal does have access to the semantic model in the service. Now, how do we go about doing that? Well, if your tenant admin has set up the service principal for Power BI, what they will have done is, in the Power BI admin window, they need to make sure service principals are enabled to call the Fabric public APIs, and that service principal was part of the security group. Now, within this example, I have a security group called Power BI Service Principals Access to APIs. Yours may be different in your environment, but more specifically, you're going to have a security group where that service principal needs to be added in order to access the public API, or the Fabric's public APIs. Now, once it's been added, the next thing you'll need to make sure is, this is my demo workspace. I'm using a Fabric trial workspace here. You do need to make sure that you're using a premium per user or a Fabric capacity. This will not work in Pro. Now, once you've kind of confirmed that you're using a capacity-backed workspace, the model that I'm going to test is or show you in this demonstration is the testing model. You'll need to make sure that the service principal has been added with at least member rights. All right, so we've created the service principal. We've added its credentials to the environment in Copilot. We made sure that your administrator has added it to the appropriate security group so it can access the APIs. And we've also made sure the service principal has access to the workspace. With that established, now we can get to the Cloud Agent. Now, if I scroll to where Copilot is, let me scroll back up. So I've gone to Settings. I've clicked on Settings. I've gone to Copilot, expanded, and go to where Cloud Agent is located. If I scroll all the way down, this is the MCP server configuration. Now, I'll put this in a gist, in a link in the YouTube description for you all. Again, thanks to Roy for giving me this configuration so I didn't have to kind of figure this out myself. What this is doing is it is going to use the Power BI modeling MCP server, which has now been registered in NPM, install that, tell it to start immediately, and use the service principal authentication, so it won't use interactive. And it then will use these environment variables, so it's mapping internally these tenant ID, client ID, and the client secret to the ones that we've registered in the environment. And then you'll want to save that configuration, and if you see it's green, then you know your JSON's good. Now at that point, you can start using the Cloud Agent. Now there's a couple other things that within this repo I've already set up, and I will include a link to this But one of the things I like to do, especially if I'm using PQL assert or UDFs, is I will go ahead and make sure I've got a specific agent called PQL tester, so that it kind of knows how to interact with the semantic model by getting the UDFs and executing the tests. I'll put this as a link in the YouTube descriptions as well. And then I have some skills files that I will use, like in this case, PQL assert, and it kind of defines all the functions that can be executed, including how to access the test cases. So I've got the repository, I've got my custom agent, I've got a skill, typical to an AI-enabled Power BI developer. I just wanted to cover that because when we go into the Cloud Agent, there's going to be some features you could turn on and off to maybe refine how you use the agent. So if I go up to Agent now, I can then choose the branch I'm working with, which I'm going to use main, and I've selected I want to use PQL tester. Now, keep in mind if the agent isn't in the main branch, let's say you had it in dev and you haven't moved it to main yet, this won't appear. It's got to be in the main branch. So if you don't see it, but you know you have an agent in another branch, that's why. So I've selected PQL tester, and I can select the model I want to use. I'm going to try to take advantage of the 0.9 percentage. And I've got a pre-built prompt here. So what I'm asking it to do is connect to that testing model in the specific workspace. And if you can't, stop. So that would tell me that maybe there's some configuration issue that I need to check. Otherwise, go ahead and run the UDF tests and execute them and tell me if anything's wrong. So back in our scenario, maybe I'm sitting in a meeting and somebody sends me a text that there's something wrong with the model. I just want to run a quick check on the model, and I'm going to ask the agent to do so. So at this point, if I hit start, I scroll down, this is going to start kicking off the agent to execute. And there's some key things I want to point out as this is spinning up. One of the things you can identify the first couple times you use this is you should see the Power BI modeling MCP server initiated within the first couple of steps. And it's usually right after the GitHub and the Playwright MCP server starts up. And if you don't see it, there's a good chance that your configuration is wrong or your service principal hasn't been set up correctly, that it can't authenticate to the Power BI Fabric service. So as it's moving through, you can see it's setting up the environment. It's already cloned the repo at this point. And now, if I zoom in, you'll see that it actually started the Power BI modeling MCP server. And if I'm using a custom agent, it's going to make sure that the PQL tester is initiated. And then you'll also see that it activated the skill. So what's nice in this interface is you can kind of see where the MCP servers get initiated and which skills get activated. Now, we're not going to wait for this to complete. I ran this session just a little earlier. And if I expand this, you will see that the output, I scroll up here, it found 7 tests in that model, and then it ran the DAX query operations. So it actually is executing that DAX remotely, and then gets the results, and these are the results. So it tells me which function it tested, or which UDF it executed, what the test name was, what was the expected, the actual. So those ones passed. And these are the ones that have failed. Now, I actually turned on one that made sure that it showed that something's failed. And then just a side note here, for right now, as of May 7th, 2026, the RLS, if you want to use effective username in the DAX operation, that is not available in the MCP server at this time. If you watch my other video, you can actually use semantic link labs to execute using effective username if you need to test RLS or OLS through the UDF libraries. But this shows you that it's failed, tells you maybe why it's failed, and this is in the case it says it couldn't use the effective username, and gave me the results. So very quickly, I mean, if I scroll back up, I think it gives me the time here. Within 2 minutes, maybe I'm in a meeting, and within 2 minutes, I can get a diagnostic on that semantic model. And this would give me the information I would use to maybe send another text message to somebody, say, hey, can you fix this, or notify, put a notice out that there's an issue with the model, and then maybe create a new test to try to avoid having that show up in production again. All right, so I hope you learned something today. What I showed you was how to set up a service principal to use the Power BI modeling MCP server within the Cloud Agent for GitHub so that we could actually query a semantic model in the service. So pretty cool stuff. And you saw that within 2 minutes we could get the information we needed and be able to move on and actually execute on any fixes or any updates. So with that, in future episodes of this channel, we're going to go dive further into cloud agents, agentic workflows, and as well as show you some new features that combine deterministic scripting of GitHub Actions with the agentic capabilities and large language model capabilities of GitHub. But until then, take care.